Hey y'all, how y'all doing? How was lunch? Good, good. So to start, I would love to go down the line and have each of y'all introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your role in your organization, as well as to talk briefly about where you think progress has been made toward diversity and inclusion over the past 3 years. So let's start here. Can you please introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Susanne DiCocco. I am a partner at Deloitte in the US, and I recently moved to America from Deloitte, Canada. So it has been quite the transition when it comes to learning new cultures, new ways, and diversity and inclusion. Part of my role at Deloitte is on the project side doing HR transformations and actually helping organizations rethink how we work with our people, whether that be the systems that we use to the processes to how we make a more inclusive work environment. And I'm actually going to go back a little further than 8 years. I'm going to go back to 2015. I made partner for the first time at a different firm in Canada for the first time in 2015. And we had our new partner global conference in Beijing. And at the time, the global leader was all very excited to announce that the new partner class was 21% women, as though this was something to celebrate. And they were all very excited because it was an increase of 30%. And in my mind, I'm thinking, it's 2015 and we're not even a quarter of the population in this firm. And I compare that with I call it the graduating class. This year's class of new partners at Deloitte in the US is 42.7% women. And that's huge. Now, one day, hopefully, we don't even have to talk about the stat because it'll just be what is.
It's amazing. Madhukar, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. I'm the founder and CEO of Numbly. We are a 3.5-year-old startup looking at bringing coaching and learning together. And when we started the company, I said we have to rebuild the company on specific principles. So we committed to diversity and inclusion on day one. I signed the CEO Action Pledge as well as the Silicon Valley Group's 25-25 pledge to hire at least 25, we're actually over 85% diverse talent. And diversity for us is not just based on gender or ethnicity, but it's also, we include neurodiverse individuals, we include disabled individuals as well in our definition. That's about the company. But what are we trying to do is we are working with companies, big global companies, to combine the worlds of D&I and L&D. These are actually two different functions in many companies, but there's a white paper from Harvard around why inclusion is the same as leadership development. And we are taking that and put that into practice. So if I can think of where we are driving impact, is helping companies understand the value of inclusive learning in the process of developing their leaders at all levels and developing the bench strength that's needed at global companies like many of yours. So we're really excited about that.
Excellent. Mark?
Hi, my name is Mark Pearson. My title back at the office is Vice President of Talent and Organizational Capabilities, which nobody knows what that means. If you're from the South, it means I have a casserole of portfolio. So essentially, we own the employee experience from the sunrise to the sunset. And we typically say sunset because 25% of our employees do come back because the industry is so small. We're really committed to moving the needle in the tech space. Obviously, diversity is a really tough slog right now, whether it be women, underrepresented, underserved groups. And we've really put a pin in and stake in the ground that we really want to get diversity right from a technology perspective on a global scale, not just the US, and in particular to increase the number of women engineers across STEM as well as people of color. So.
Great. Julia?
Hi, everyone. My name's Julia Lashay-Israel, and I'm the head of inclusion and belonging for Keller Williams Realty. And my role is a little bit different than some of you all because most of our people are actually contractors. We're real estate agents. And so we work in the space of real estate where, of course, we have our corporate headquarters here and employees, but 170,000 people out there in the field that we serve. And so my role is twofold. One, being in the real estate industry, we believe that people build wealth through the acquisition of real estate. In the United States, most people build their wealth through home ownership. And we have a very large disparity in our country as it relates to home ownership. And so the agent then becomes a very instrumental role in that and is literally the conduit of the American dream. So our perspective of diversity, equity, and inclusion is twofold. One, to train all of our real estate agents, all 170,000 of them, to learn how to work with all the people so that all the people have access to wealth in America. And then, of course, we have our internal diversity, equity, inclusion strategies, which is really to help people build wealth internally and have opportunities within the organization, and to make sure that all of our offices, which we call market centers, are an inclusive space so that anybody, no matter what they look like, where they come from, what they believe, short, tall, fat, ugly, skinny, whatever it is you are, know that you actually belong at our organization, and it is a place where you can come and be successful and where entrepreneurs thrive. And we've been working on that for the last 3 years, as you mentioned, with a number of different strategies and things that I know that we'll talk about. Like many companies started post George Floyd or in the wake of the murder of George Floyd, and unlike a lot of companies, have increased our efforts of diversity, equity, and inclusion, even in the face of some adversity.
Thank you. And finally, Janet.
Hey, everybody. Janet Etlinger. And I'm with Hewlett Packard Enterprise. And internally, we call ourselves HPE. At HPE, we've got just over 60,000 team members worldwide, and we offer software, hardware solutions to help big enterprise customers run their business. As for me, I have the pleasure of serving as the head of the compute business unit. So I have a team of HR business partners. And what we do is the compute business is essentially responsible for designing, developing, and delivering general purpose servers that help our customers with their data and their workloads, which is exploding with AI. So we've got a whole new world going on with power consumption and carbon footprint. But, you know, when I think about the progress that I think we've made, we should all be really proud of what we've done as leaders, collectively, as a community. I think we've made a ton of progress in the last 3 years, and we've been focused on the whole system and interrupting, you know, those key moments throughout the talent life cycle to start to systematize driving outcomes for DE&I. But I still think we have a long way to go. I have to tell you, I had the honor of being in the boardroom this week with our leadership team, and there's not enough diversity at the top. And it's like, we got to get there. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
So to some degree, the push for DEI over the last few years has created some sort of a backlash. Some would call it diversity fatigue. When we had our prep call, Julia, you talked about how the term DEI has been weaponized. How is your company's response? How did that affect your company's response?
Well, obviously being located in Texas, and Texas being one of the states, I suppose it's fair to call it anti-DEI. There were conversations around what do we call it? Do we continue to call it diversity, equity, inclusion? Which, by the way, I understand when I speak of realtors because I'm a realtor, and in our realtor independent contractor world, realtors don't know what DEI means, right? That is a very corporate term. And the term, most people actually don't know what it means. They just hear on TV that we're against that. We're against that DEI. And they're like, oh yeah, we're against that. Mm-hmm. And they don't even know what that is, that they're actually against. And so we literally started writing out, I'm opposed to using the abbreviation Because I know that when it's thrown around, most people don't even know what it is that they're saying they're against. Diversity is just all of you, right? You're all very different. You're different than her. She's different than her. We have a very diverse room, even if it's just diversity of perspective and thought. So if you're against diversity, you're against people? I'm perplexed by this, right? So we did even actually have a vote with some of our leadership of, do we continue to call it diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, when it is being used as propaganda, And so, and we threw around some other names and decided that we are going to call it exactly what it is, which is diversity and equity and inclusion. And we just forged forth, and like I said, in the face of diversity and adversity, because what we're about is people. We are a people business, and most of you are, all of you are. In fact, I would venture to say 100% of your employees are people, right? And so that we know so far.
The aliens are coming.
And the robots, let's be honest.
But honestly, it's really what diversity is. And all we want to do is make sure that you feel comfortable and that you have inclusion and belonging so that you stay working at the company. And and there's so many things that have been used in the term of DEI to weaponize that, to make it something that it's not. And so it's very interesting and fascinating to me. People have called it all kinds of different things. I like to call our DEI training people training, because I'm looking at how different you all look, and you all look like people to me, right? And so it's just interesting how that's being used and how that's being opposed. And so I am cautious about words that I use, though. And particularly, this is just my personal opinion, not that of Keller Williams. I prefer to explicitly write it out, because I have found that most people, if you say DEI, really have no idea what it even means, or what you're doing, or what the work means. They just know that they heard that it's a bad thing that they don't want to do, or they don't want to be a part of.
Yeah. Janet, do you have anything to add?
I think I love the way you commented on we're all people, and we are in a really polarizing climate right now. From a Hewlett Packard enterprise perspective, back in 2019, we baked in something, you all will know the term unconditional inclusion, in our culture code. And our CEO and our leadership team, they're fiercely committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion, despite kind of the environment we're all operating in. So I would just say, we're continuing down the path and staying focused on our values and our culture, and, recognizing that we need to also listen to everybody. So one of the things that we've done this year, in spite of some of the polarization, is we've required all of our workforce this year, as a matter of fact, in April, to do anti-discrimination and non-discrimination training, like legal training. We had everybody go through that, and we track that. And then we've also kind of amped up our listening sessions to be very balanced about surfacing concerns that we can then take head on in the environment that we're in. So,
yeah. So it seems like inclusive leadership training is really essential to making these efforts scalable. Can you talk about your company's leadership initiative, Janet?
Oh, sure.
Sorry.
So I'm sure many of you, we have inclusive leadership training that is required for our people leaders. We've actually baked it into the onboarding experience, or if you're a new people leader, you get promoted, you have to take, this is one of the key things that's baked into those modules. And the other thing that we've done is inclusion for all. So we invited all of our 60,000 team members to participate in Inclusion for All. And we've been very pleased with over 75% of our workforce participated in it and have all been a part of it. So really, really cool to see, those types of things when you're offering it more optional than mandatory. Now, clearly from a leadership perspective, it's a leadership imperative. So it's something that we stay focused on.
Talk to me, Susanne, about some of your efforts that your company has made.
Oh, sure. So I'd actually start by saying the concepts of diversity, equity, inclusion aren't just words. At Deloitte, my experience has been they're truly woven into the fabric of who we are, how we lead, what our culture is like. Now, we've been around for 175 years, so trust me when I tell you it hasn't always been that way. So how did we get there? And formal mandatory training is table stakes. So we have robust mandatory training for all leaders to take. And what's incredible about the training, and if you talk to the people at that table over there, the majority have taken it. What makes it so effective is that it's not theoretical. We are hearing cases that have gone through HR or have gone through feedback loops or have been brought up. And there are people talking to us in the first voice of what has happened to them. And going through that training was incredibly powerful. And I think it changed the trajectory of how we think. That's the formal part of it. And like I say, I think that's just table stakes. But then we also, because we're such an entrepreneurial spirit of a company, we have all these ideas that pop up all over the place and people just run with them. And one of the things that has come up and has just been incredibly supported is our network of allies. And really that means that we all get to learn. You know, you can join in a group of allies even if you're not part or you don't look like that group. But all of these opportunities to learn has developed into this culture of the expectation that if I say something that I might have tripped over, and trust me, it's happened to me more than once coming to America from Canada, if I trip, that you know that you can tell me right away in the moment that made you uncomfortable, or here's how you could change that, or whatever. And I, in the moment, am open to listening to that feedback. And that's just a part of who we are. That's just a part of what we do. So then that gets bigger and bigger to the point where, and we are a global company, but to the point where when we're thinking about inclusion, we're thinking about, well, how do we get the most people to feel like we care and they belong? Well, even when the simple things like, what time do you book a meeting where you're going to have people from India, Seattle, Germany, and New York, and Austin? What time are you going to book that? So that you're not always having someone on the phone at 11 o'clock at night or 3 o'clock in the morning. Because if you continue to do that, if they continue to have to show up at 11 o'clock, they're just going to think you don't even care, you don't see them. So weaving it into the fabric of your leadership and who you are is the outcome, I think, of all of these initiatives. But training in and of itself, that's just your start.
Yeah. Madhukar, I know your company is focused around leadership training. Can you talk a little bit about how that works for you?
So we started off as a coaching, management, and learning company. And then as we started to talk to our customers, what we found, especially around the concept of weaponization of D&I, diversity was where the focus was, whether it was training, compliance learning, and recruiting and everything. We tried to first work with our customers to move it towards inclusive leadership. And that change really made a big impact for all of our customers. Inclusive leadership is actually a set of skills. We actually have many competencies, skills, and learning areas. And by doing that, we converted the debate around D&I into an opportunity to learn and grow and bring in existing L&D budgets to pay and support the programs for D&I. So that's the first step. Second step is, normally it's based on numbers. We develop a lot of analytics around engagement. And our patterns are all about converting engagement into business outcomes. So when our customers were looking for metrics to track around D&I, or for any learning and development program for that matter, we modified the approach towards looking at engagement first and driving the vectors of outcomes through actual engagement. So that was sort of the second thing. And the third thing is, we actually redefined inclusive leadership in very simple English words. It was not your traditional definition from an HR organizational design experts defining it. We said, let's start with including everybody's ideas. It is where it's very powerful when you include everybody's idea, irrespective of gender, ethnicity, location, to your point about distributed. And we started right during the pandemic, which was sort of an interesting thing. Now we talk about remote work and hybrid work. How can managers include everybody's ideas over Zoom or whatever virtual technology they are using? We actually converted that into competencies for including ideas in workflow. So by doing that, we have been able to sort of take our customers' cultures and help them augment in those areas, both learning and looking at the metrics for figuring out the return on those investments. Because most L&D groups and the D&I ERGs we work with, many of our customers have 25 different ERGs in different locations and regions on one topic, D&I. And another 20 more ERGs on engagement, right? So we are trying to collapse all of that and say, hey, this is about learning. And this is about helping your teams deliver performance. And so that's what we do within our company. And of course, we have a software platform and structure and patented analytics with machine learning to guide customers through that process.
Great. So how can an inclusive culture be built into the system of your company, ranging from objectives tied to performance and pay, as well as grassroots elements like inclusion, ambassadors? Mark, we haven't heard from you yet. Do you have any thoughts on this?
For us at AMD, the culture is the most important piece, right? So many organizations focusing on the pipeline and can I increase the overall representation within the organization. Great, your pipeline gets better, your new hires look great, but if your culture stinks, you're still going to run into the same statistics where they're changing their first job after 18 months, and you never really build the middle part of your organization. So for us, we have a 5P strategy. So we talk about equity. For us, the equity is there's 5 Ps that we measure both proactively before compensation systems come in for things like what's the promotion rates of the different various groups prior to us finalizing so that we can make adjustments or corrections or that kind of thing. How are we designating potential? Is it equal? What are the promotion rates themselves? What's the pipeline looking like? So for us, that creates an environment that regardless of what constituency or what group you may be part of, you look around and see folks that are like you, but the culture is also embracing. You're seeing your brothers and sisters getting promoted. You're seeing them activated around the top talent programming. And we talk about it openly. That creates the culture that then you can start tying in some of these other inclusions. Then they believe it. Otherwise, it looks like corporate speak and blah, 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 blah. And that's absolutely what you would not want to have. So once you've got that environment, and for us, turnover for women at AMD is lower than the average turnover. Our engagement scores for women, people of color, are better than they are for the mass population. So we look for key components of, is our culture the right place so that we can really think about our pipeline truly working?
Janet, talk a little bit about the culture that you've tried to develop.
Absolutely. And I love what you said, Mark, because culture eats strategy, eats performance, eats everything for breakfast. We all know this, right? Mindset is everything. And I'm so passionate about leadership and role modeling, and you can't say enough about that. So we have leadership behaviors that we've brought our leaders into that. We have learning programs, we have development programs focused on leadership. Our 4 elements, we call it living inside the element. I have my element on my suit here, the green element. And some of the things that we're doing, so we've got kind of top down, bottoms up, culture reinforcing activity. One is our most senior leaders quarterly, at the beginning of the year, they get management by objectives, very detailed statements that are personalized to each senior vice president and above. And one of the components of their performance and their pay is tied to DE&I. And I can't get into too many more details, but there's several other sections in this lovely PDF that each one of them see from executive compensation every quarter, highly protected information. And they know all throughout the year exactly how they're tracking and how they're doing. And it's very important from the top. And then from the bottoms up in the compute business unit, we are doubling down on inclusion across the globe. So we've stood up an inclusion council and have a lot of our up and coming talent that will participate in an 18-month inclusion council stint, so to speak. And we'll be amplifying things like an I Belong speaker series and really customized development for our diverse folks, right? And those types of things.
How have employee resource groups and affinity groups tied into your DEI strategy, and have they been effective? Julia, could you speak to that?
Sure, absolutely. So internally, when we're referring to staff, there are several ERG groups that exist. Most notably, though, are the affinity groups that exist for the 170,000 agents that I referred to. And we've got about 12 of those. We've got Hispanic leaders, we've got KW Chispa, we've got a special needs group, we've got KW Simca, which is a Jewish group. We've got a number of different, the Black real estate professionals, so on and so forth, KW Rainbow. And so they are, the interesting part about that is they are made for the agents, by the agents. It's actually not a company initiative. The agents created the groups, and of course we support them in that and doing that. But they've been effective partly because of that reason. And for a number of things that we've already spoken about from the stage here, such as the importance of inclusion. Affinity groups are really just groups and spaces for people to, one, have a sense of belonging. I know you all heard about that earlier. And two, be able to share share similar experiences or resources or tools that are specific to their demographic, whatever that might be. For example, in real estate, most of you probably don't know that that you can buy a home without a social security number. Now, that's not necessarily relevant in most of our demographics, but to the Hispanic population, they're using I-10 to buy homes. That's incredibly relevant. And so there are certain groups that just have the tools and training and resources that are specific to the demographics they serve. And because they are agent-led and they are initiatives that and of course we're just a bunch of wild entrepreneurs anyhow, they are very successful in creating these organizations that some of them have even gone on to be their nonprofit organizations, and they do funding. And even have housing initiatives and housing grants provided for people in their communities. So they've been growing, and as long as your idea isn't crazy ridiculous, we allow them to create an affinity group to serve whatever group it is. And it is, I shouldn't say crazy ridiculous, because it is for historically marginalized communities are what affinity groups are generally for. So as long as it falls under that purview. But doing so does provide the psychological safety and the tools and the resources, and above all else, the sense of belonging that people need. It is an innate human desire to belong to something. And those spaces absolutely provide that, and if led correctly, where they are inclusionary and they're not exclusionary, because I know in some spaces people say, well, why do you have those groups? There shouldn't be that kind of division. And some people see ERGs and affinity groups as divisive. And changing that perspective to understand that people simply want someone who understands the language you speak. And I'm using that as an analogy, not necessarily literally the language you speak, but experiences you've had, things that you experience at work even, things that happen in the world that other people simply may not relate to. Creating that sense of belonging, that innate human need to belong, is incredibly effective for organizations.
Can we talk about that idea of psychological safety that you brought up? Because I think that's a big one. Madhukar, you said that that's actually the most significant factor to employee retention. Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. And if you look at all the factors for retention, it's not monetary for the most part. It's, as you said, the sense of belonging or the psychological safety. And so when we talk about D&I with our customers and we look at the skills that we actually work with. And you see that it starts with listening, active listening, and it goes all the way into deep dives into the aspects of safety that everybody wants. And then all of our work that we do two things deliberately, intentionally. One is there is training, but training is coupled with actual practice, and you will be coached to practice what you're learning. So people managers will work with their teams to actually practice what they learned. Second thing is for managers to actually see the progression of development of their teams, which is both important. Because if D&I is always bucketed as a requirement for compliance checkbox training or something else, or a ERG mandate to doing or rolling out something, it's never looked at as what's the benefit to the company or the business at the manager and team level. And so we try to bring those two things together. And by doing this, our tagline is engage first via coaching, coach second, and perform is third. Psychological safety and retention are two vectors we actually focus on with all of our customers. We have actually developed surveys for around that. I wouldn't call it structured assessments, but they're very good indicators of where the current state is. And by picking a set of skills to work on, we actually show how we can improve psychological safety and inclusion of ideas together. So that's what we do with our customers today.
Yeah, so technology companies in particular have struggled to reach their DEI goals. Mark, given your experience in the industry, what are some approaches that you've seen that have proven effective?
It's true. So AMD is in semiconductors, and we've lost a generation, and we're trying desperately not to lose the next generation. Hardware engineering is now about 15% women in the United States. And so you have 3 or 4 companies that are trying to fight for that same, and instead of focusing on the pipeline. So Susan Moore is a corporate vice president within our organization. We're really focused on AMDers investing back into the community. We do an engineering school here where we start telling them, hey, we make Xbox chips, isn't that cool? And try to get them in the beginning. We also have Sony PlayStation chips that we make, and hey, you want to play? So it's fun stuff that we do, and we create new learning environments, and so we start there, and then quite frankly, when you walk into a group of 25,000 people, if we're primarily hardware engineering and there's only 15%, we have to do a lot internally to make sure that 15%, we're actually closer to 20, which is it sounds terrible. It's much like what you were describing at Deloitte, years ago. It's well above what's in the world, but we're not happy with it, right? Because we want AMD to be a place where people can come and thrive and do well. And I think what works well is, again, back to what I said earlier, is creating the culture where they opt in, they select in, they can be authentically themselves. And I think we're creating that environment, and that helps there, but we also have to, together as a team, quite frankly, provide the psychological safety that you were just talking about. I think if there's one thing, whether it's where I'm working with AMD Women's Forum, or yesterday I was with Pride, and you can imagine working with a Pride group here in Texas as we do, everyone is feeling unsafe. And quite frankly, I think most of our organizations did really good in the early days of COVID, of being a place of safety for their employees and having the conversations. If we can apply that same kind of energy to our ERG groups today, who are feeling very unsafe, we have the methodology, we have the conversations that we've had before, we have the playbook, but making it that much a priority because, especially from our employees in Texas and Florida, many of those groups are feeling very unsafe. And they're looking to us as the company, much like they did during the COVID days, please tell me I'll be safe.
Yeah.
Because I may not get it from my state government. I may not get it from my local municipality. And much like many of our organizations did in COVID, okay, we'll give you the path. We'll create that place. And the 2,040 hours that you spend in here will be a safe place for you. And that will begin to create the kind of environment that will encourage young ladies to want to go into STEM as well, because now we're going home and talking about what a safe place and what a comfortable place and what a happy place it is. when we sometimes can't control the chaos that's out there. And that's up to us in this room to be able to help our leadership say, you've played this book, just shift the focus a bit.
Yeah, for sure. Susanne, what are some of the things to keep in mind when developing metrics to track where you are with diversity efforts?
How many people in this room are statisticians? Anyone? Whew, okay, good. I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole of the theory around metrics, because there's a whole area of design that is just, and people at Deloitte that are way smarter than me that do this for a living. But I'm going to twist the question a little bit and talk about the importance of it. And I'll talk about Deloitte's example. So we have 13 outcomes that all around diversity, equity, inclusion that Deloitte has said as a company, here's what we're trying to achieve as outcomes. And that includes the percentage of traditionally underrepresented groups, women at all different levels. And it includes pay equity. It includes the amount of money that we spend on vendors that are Black-owned businesses. It is a range of moving the needle around diversity, equity, inclusion, not just in how we act as a company and how we are internally, but how we want to impact our community and the world. And so the key around metrics is to be very clear on what outcomes you're trying to achieve and to measure. Just start measuring. Start with what you have, and it doesn't need to take, 2 years to develop the metrics and then another 2. Start with what you have. I think the second part is, and we call it the transparency report because it's completely transparent. So every year it gets published, and every single person who works at Deloitte can go in and look to see what percentage of our staff at what level is cut by race, gender, intersectionality, sexual orientation, religion, mental health, disabilities, veterans. We literally measure exactly what we want to try to achieve. And every year you can go in and you can look to see, have we improved? Oh, we've gone down. Why did we go down? Why did we go up? But the fact that it is completely transparent is what makes it powerful. If you're going to do a survey and you're going to keep it secret and only the board sees it, not sure what the point of doing it is. And I would say that the third thing around this is, it's not, and going to segue a little bit, but DE&I is not a program. It's not a thing. It's every little action that you do every single day. And you can start measuring yourself. What are the words that you're choosing? Did you accidentally use a sports analogy of hockey when you're talking to, my group here, which nobody watches hockey in Texas? Wrong analogy. Completely went over their heads. Are you doing things consciously that bring your team closer to you, that make you a leader, that allow them to look up and see someone that looks like them, that sounds like them, that acts like them, and get out of the box of whatever it's supposed to be? And I think that's, if you can start measuring yourself, I'd say that's the most important thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. We have about a minute left. Madhukar, can you just give any advice on how companies might develop metrics to track their own progress? Briefly.
Yeah, so in terms of metrics, obviously it's a pyramid of metrics. To your point about looking at 15, sort of critical metrics makes a lot of sense to begin. But I would encourage each of you to think about some from the top, 1 or 2 to work with that you can manage and monitor. I think retention by group is a very good metric. Retention is a numerical way of modeling the culture within the team. There are various aspects of it. And then for L&D teams, to look at D&I as not being outside their purview. I think if you can connect L&D, D&I, and retention together in your world of metrics, you can actually be a true enabler of driving a change within the entire organization.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much to all of our panel for this great conversation, and thank you so much to all of y'all for coming and attending.